Captain Ilara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The stars stretched out like scattered diamonds on black velvet, unchanging and indifferent. It had been 3 months since the human exodus, 3 months since the last colony ship vanished into the warp lanes, leaving the Orion Arm to the whispers of forgotten outposts. Ilara's ship, the Resilience, was one of the stragglers, a battered freighter retrofitted for salvage runs. She wasn't sure if they were the last or just late to the party, but the emptiness gnawed at her. Beside her, Jax Harlan leaned against the viewport, his wiry frame slouched in that perpetual half-relaxed pose that hid his sharp mind. Jax was the engineer, the one who kept the ship humming when everything else failed. He fiddled with a diagnostic pad, his fingers dancing over the screen. "Fuel cells are holding at 60%, he muttered, not looking up. "But if we push to Vega Prime we'll be scraping the bottom." Again. Ilara nodded, her short-cropped hair catching the dim glow of the console lights. She was the cautious one, always calculating risks like they were equations to balance. Brave enough to captain this ghost run, but not foolish enough to ignore the odds. "We need those parts. The array on Vega's the only shot at boosting our signal. Maybe catch a relay from the core worlds." Jax snorted, pocketing the pad. "Core worlds? As if anyone's listening anymore. Humanity bails without a traceback code, and we're out here playing fetch with scraps." His voice carried that wry edge, the wit that cut through tension like a laser. He straightened, glancing at her with eyes that had seen too many hull breaches. "You think they left us for dead?" Before Ilara could answer, the comms crackled to life. "Captain, sensors picking up something odd. Not a ship, looks like debris field, but it's moving." Mira Chen's voice was steady, laced with the quiet focus that made her the best navigator on a crew of 3. Mira was in the bridge, her cautious optimism the glue holding them together. She joined late, after her own colony folded, bringing maps and a belief that persistence paid off. Ilara pushed off the railing, her boots thudding softly on the deck plates. "On my way." The corridor lights flickered as she moved, a reminder of the ship's age. Jax fell in step behind her, his humor fading into alertness. The bridge was a cramped nest of screens and controls, Mira hunched over her station amid the hum of cooling fans. She tapped a holographic display, projecting a swirling mass ahead, fragments glinting in the starlight, coalescing like a reluctant storm. "It's not natural drift," Mira said, swiveling her chair. Her dark hair was tied back, practical as always. "Patterns suggest artificial origin. Could be wreckage from one of ours, or something else." Ilara slid into the command seat, pulling up the scan data. The readings spiked. Metallic alloys, energy signatures faint but present. Her gut twisted. In the wake of humanity's departure, the galaxy had grown quiet, but not empty. Rumors filtered through old channels, xenoscavengers, automated defenses left active, or worse, the silent watchers who'd always orbited human expansion without interference. "Helm, adjust course to intercept. Slow approach." Ilara's order was crisp, masking the unease coiling in her chest. Jax dropped into the engineering console, his fingers flying to prep defenses. Shields hummed to life, a low vibration through the hull. As the Resilience closed in, the debris resolved into sharper forms. Shattered hulls, twisted frames bearing unfamiliar script. Not human. Ilara's breath caught. The markings were Caliph, nomadic traders who'd bartered with colonies before the Exodus. But these weren't traders, they were remnants of a fleet gutted and adrift. "Sensors confirm," Mira whispered. "Life signs. Faint but there." Jax cursed under his breath. "Boarding party? Or do we ghost past and pretend we didn't see?" Ilara stared at the display, the weight of decision pressing down. Leaving meant survival, but the cost, abandoning potential allies in a void that had already swallowed so much, felt like another piece of humanity slipping away. "Prep the airlock," she said finally. "We're checking it out." The docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan, linking the Resilience to the largest Caliph fragment. Ilara led the way through the makeshift umbilical, her EVA suit's lights cutting swaths through the gloom. Jax followed, toolkit slung over his shoulder, while Mira monitored from the ship. The airlock cycled, venting a hiss of recycled atmosphere into vacuum-sealed corridors beyond. Inside, the wreck was a labyrinth of sparking panels and floating debris. Ilara's helmet beam swept over bulkheads etched with glowing runes now dimmed. A faint groan echoed, structural stress or something alive. They pressed on, mag boots clanging rhythmically. Then, a shape detached from the shadows. Tall, slender, its iridescent skin flickering under emergency strobes. Caliph physiology, elongated limbs, multifaceted eyes reflecting their lights. It clutched an injured arm, fluid beating in 0G. The alien tilted its head, mandibles clicking in what might have been surprise or plea. Ilara raised a gloved hand, palm out, universal caution. "We're not hostiles," she said, voice filtering through the suit's comm. "Can you understand?" The Calitha's eyes narrowed, then, it gestured weakly toward a nearby hatch. Jack scanned with his pad. Life support's failing in there. More signatures, survivors. Ilara nodded, heart pounding. This wasn't. Ilara stared at the flickering console, her claws tapping rhythmically against the armrest. The ship's hum had changed since they'd left the orbital station. Deeper, almost reluctant, as if the engine sensed the void ahead. Kale, her co-pilot, slumped in the adjacent seat, his fur matted from the hasty departure. He was the cautious one, always double-checking fuel ratios and scanning for debris, but now his eyes were fixed on the view screen where stars blurred into streaks. "We should have waited for the Council's approval," Kale muttered, not looking at her. His voice carried that familiar edge like gravel underfoot. "Jumping into uncharted space without coordinates? This isn't exploration, it's suicide." Ilara didn't respond immediately. She adjusted the throttle, feeling the vessel respond with a subtle shudder. Brave didn't mean reckless, but someone had to act. The archives back on Zorath Prime had been clear. Humanity's signal cut off 3 cycles ago, right after their fleets vanished from the relay networks. No warnings, no debris fields, just silence. And in that silence the heavens felt empty. The great migration routes that humans had charted for 1,000 years now looped aimlessly, trade lanes forgotten. Her people, the Zorathians, had relied on those maps for generations. Without them, the Empire frayed at the edges. A proximity alert chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. Kale straightened, his ears perking. What now? The screen resolved into a hazy nebula, tendrils of gas coiling like forgotten dreams. But something pierced it, a derelict station human-designed, its hull scarred by micrometeorites. Ilara's hearts quickened. That's one of theirs. Pre-disappearance era. We're not the first to stumble on it, but no one's claimed salvage rights since the blackout. Kale leaned forward, scanning the readings. Life support's offline. Radiation levels nominal, but the docking clamps are jammed. Could be a trap. Pirates love hiding in these relics. She shot him a wry glance, her tail flicking. Or it could be answers. You want to drift forever, waiting for the Council to debate? Dock us. He grumbled but complied, fingers dancing over the controls. The ship eased closer, thrusters firing in short bursts. As they aligned, Ilara caught a glint from the station's viewport. A faint glow, not mechanical but organic. Bioluminescence? Humans didn't build with that. Contact. The clamps groaned into place, metal on metal echoing through the hull. Ilara stood, grabbing her toolkit. Welders, scanners, the basics. Kale hesitated, then followed, slinging a pulse rifle over his shoulder. Just in case. The airlock cycled with a hiss, spilling them into the station's dim corridor. Emergency lights pulsed red, casting long shadows that danced like specters. Dust motes hung suspended, undisturbed for cycles. Ilara's scanner beeped softly, atmosphere intact but stale. No power beyond basics. Feels wrong, Kale whispered, his rifle sweeping the gloom. Like the place is holding its breath. She nodded, moving forward. The corridor branched, walls etched with human script, faded warnings about containment protocols. They chose the left path toward the glow. Footsteps echoed too loudly in the quiet. The chamber at the end was a lab, consoles shattered, vials scattered like broken teeth. In the center, suspended in a cryogenic pod, floated a figure. Not human, slender, scaled, with fins that shimmered iridescent. An Aquilon from the outer rims. Alive barely. The pod's readouts flickered, vital signs weak but stable. And attached to it, a data slate, blinking with a single message in Galactic Standard. They left us behind. Find the why. Ilara's breath caught. Kale lowered his rifle, eyes wide. This changes everything. If humans abandon their allies. She pried open the pod's panel, bypassing the locks with a spark from her welder. The figure stirred as the frost cleared, eyes fluttering open, golden, piercing. Who are you? It rasped, voice like bubbling water. Zorathians, Ilara said, helping it sit up. We came looking for your creators. The Aquilon coughed, clutching the slate. They didn't create us. They elevated us. And then, without warning, they folded space and vanished. Took the stars with them. Its gaze hardened. But I know where they went. Or at least the last vector. Kale exchanged a look with Ilara, tension coiling in his stance. This wasn't just salvage, it was a thread to pull, unraveling the Empire's foundations. Outside, the nebula churned, as if the universe itself conspired to keep secrets buried. Kale gripped the console edge as the shuttle shuddered through the debris field, the viewport alive with tumbling fragments of what had once been Earth's orbital ring. Sparks danced across the panels, and the hum of failing stabilizers filled the cabin like a dying breath. Beside him, Lyra scanned the readouts, her tendrils twitching with frustration. The human beacons are silent now, she said, voice steady but edged with something raw. We've looped the sector 3 times. If there's a survivor, they're not broadcasting. Zorak, strapped into the co-pilot seat, punched coordinates into the NAV system with more force than necessary. His broad shoulders tensed under the harness, the scar from their last skirmish with human defenses pulling tight across his jaw. Survivors? That's optimism talking. Whatever took them hit clean, ships, stations, the whole damn cradle of their species. Gone like smoke. He glanced back at Kale, eyes narrowing. You still think this is worth the fuel? Command's recall order came in an hour ago. Kale didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, tracing a flickering hologram of the solar system. Empty vectors where human fleets had patrolled, silent now. The challenge gnawed at him. Not just the void left by humanity's abrupt exit, but the unraveling of their own mission. Their fleet had been poised for conquest, probes embedded in every asteroid belt, waiting for the signal to strike. Now, with no enemy to fight, the armada drifted aimlessly, crews whispering of curses or divine retribution. Kale's own doubts had started as a whisper during the first watch after the vanishing. Why push deeper into this graveyard when glory had evaporated? Recall means surrender, Kale finally said, his voice low, resolute. He was the brave one, always had been, the one who'd volunteered for this forward recon when others hung back. We came for their tech, their worlds. If we leave empty-handed, the High Council will strip our ranks. But look here. He magnified the hollow, highlighting a faint anomaly near the Lagrangian point. Residual energy signatures. Not natural. Human design, I'd bet my pot on it. Lyra's tendrils stilled, then curled in intrigue. She was the cautious heart of their trio, the engineer who'd patched their hull more times than Kale could count. Could be a trap. Or wreckage masking something worse. Our sensors are blind without their relay network. She tapped a sequence, rerouting power to the forward arrays. The shuttle lurched as a chunk of alloy glanced off the shields, vibrating through the deck like a warning drum. Zorak snorted, witty even in tension. Trap? From ghosts? Fine, Captain's call. But if we snag a human artifact, it's mine. I need a trophy to shut up the bridge gossips. He adjusted thrust, veering toward the signal. The debris thickened, shadows playing across the hull in erratic patterns. Kale felt the pull of it, the risk sharpening his focus. They'd lost contact with the main fleet hours ago, comms choked by solar flares or something subtler. Pushing on meant defying orders, betting their lives on a hunch. But turning back? That would hollow them out worse than any void. As they closed in, the anomaly resolved into a sleek pod, half buried in a lattice of twisted girders. Human markings gleamed under the emergency lights, salvageable, maybe even intact. Lyra's console beeped urgently. Life signs? No, but power cores active. Faint but pulsing. Kale unstrapped, grabbing his harness kit. The shuttle matched velocity with a groan, docking clamps extending like hesitant fingers. Whatever waited inside could rewrite their purpose, or end it. He met their eyes, the unspoken pact binding them tighter than any chain. Together, then. No heroics. The airlock cycled with a hiss, spilling them into dim corridors lit by stuttering strips. Debris floated lazily, a boot here, a data slate there, frozen in the moment of abandonment. Kale led, scanner probing ahead, the weight of silence pressing in. Zor's hand rested on his sidearm, Lyra's tools clinking softly. They moved as one, the thrill of discovery cutting through the dread. But as they rounded a bulkhead, the pod's hatch loomed ajar, and a low hum emanated from within, like a heartbeat reluctant to fade. Elora floated in the vast emptiness of the observation spire, her luminous form flickering like a distant star against the obsidian walls. The spire, once alive with the hum of divine energies, now echoed with silence that pressed in from all sides. She traced a finger along the central orb, its surface cool and unresponsive, devoid of the vibrant threads that had woven human fates for eons. They were supposed to endure, she murmured, her voice a ripple in the ether. We shaped them for resilience, not this. Kaler, her counterpart, hovered nearby, his form more solid, edged with the stubborn glow of unyielding purpose. He had always been the anchor, the one who argued for intervention when the humans teetered on the brink of their own follies. Now he paced the spire's perimeter, his light casting long shadows that danced like forgotten memories. Endure? We watched them build empires from scraps, defy storms that would shatter worlds. And then, poof, gone. No cataclysm, no plea for aid. Just absence. He slammed a fist into the wall, sending a faint tremor through the structure. The spire groaned, a rare sound that made Elora wince. She turned from the orb, her cautious nature urging restraint. Pacing won't summon answers, Kaler. The archives are barren. The echoes of their prayers have faded to whispers. What if their leaving was deliberate? A rejection of us? The thought hung heavy, a shadow over her glow. In the epochs before, humans had been their greatest charge, fragile yet fierce, inventing tools from fire and stone, forging bonds that spanned divides no other species dared. But now the heavens felt hollow, their purpose unraveling like a tapestry pulled thread by thread. Kaler's eyes narrowed, sparks of defiance flaring in his aura. Rejection? They needed us. Or did they? He approached the orb, willing it to respond, but it remained inert, a polished void reflecting their unease. Memories flooded unbidden, humans launching crude vessels into the void, their ingenuity piercing the veil between worlds. They had questioned the stars, mapped the unseen, and in their final cycles, whispered of ascending beyond even divine sight. We assumed we'd guide them forever. But what if they outgrew the leash? Elora shook her head, her light dimming slightly. The risk gnawed at her. The Celestial Council had already begun to fracture, other watchers drifting into apathy, their forms losing cohesion. Without humans to inspire, to challenge, the heavens risked dissolution. We can't afford assumptions. The lower realms stir, lesser beings sense the void and grow bold. If we don't uncover their path, our own light fades. She extended a hand, weaving a tentative probe into the orb's depths. Faint images stirred, a human city ablaze with artificial lights, then darkness swallowing it whole. No screams, no struggle, just a collective exhale as if the species had stepped through an unseen door. Kaler joined her, his bold energy bolstering the probe. Together they pushed deeper, the spire vibrating with the effort. A new vision emerged, sharper than before. Humans gathered in hidden enclaves, their faces etched with determination. One figure, a leader with calloused hands and eyes like forged steel, spoke of the threshold, a device born of their relentless curiosity, a bridge to realms beyond godly reach. They built it, Kaler breathed, awe cracking his frustration. From the bones of their world, they crafted escape. But the vision fractured, the orb resisting further intrusion. Pain lanced through Elora, her form flickering erratically. She pulled back, gasping. Too far. The threshold repels us. It's as if they wove it with intent, to leave us behind. The realization settled like dust after a storm. Humans with their grit and camaraderie hadn't vanished in defeat. They'd chosen transcendence, their triumph a quiet severing of ties. Kaler clenched his fists, the spire's walls seeming to close in. Then we follow. Or we perish in irrelevance. His words carried the weight of risk. The chase could unravel their essence, drawing the council's wrath. Yet in his voice, Elora heard the spark of adventure, the same fire humans had kindled in them long ago. She nodded, resolve hardening her light. The probe hummed once more, tentative but unyielding as they ventured toward the unknown edge of creation. The heavens might have lost their purpose, but in pursuing the lost children they might reclaim their own. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Kale's face, casting sharp shadows that made his iridescent scales look like fractured obsidian. He hunched over the panel in the cramped observatory of the derelict station, fingers, tentacles really dancing across the haptic interface with a precision born of desperation. The air recyclers hummed faintly, a reminder that even this forgotten outpost clung to life, but the silence beyond was absolute, broken only by the soft whir of failing servos. Beside him, Mira leaned against the bulkhead, her compound eyes reflecting the starfield outside the viewport. She was the cautious one, always calculating odds, her exoskeletal frame rigid with unspoken worry. This isn't working, Kale. The signal's degraded beyond recovery. Whatever the humans left behind, it's not talking to us anymore. Kale didn't look up. His witty retort died on his lips as another error chime pierced the quiet, a shrill reminder of their isolation. The station orbited Epsilon Eridani's third world, a dusty rock the humans had seeded with probes decades ago, before their inexplicable exodus. No wars, no plagues, just gone. Billions vanished overnight, leaving behind a galaxy of half-finished projects and bewildered allies like the Vexry Collective. Kale and Mira had been envoys meant to oversee joint ventures. Now they were scavengers chasing echoes. He tapped a sequence, rerouting power from non-essentials. The lights dimmed further, and a holographic display sputtered to life, projecting a grainy schematic of the human terraformer buried deep in the planet's crust. One more try, he muttered, his voice a gravelly buzz. Their ingenuity wasn't in the stars, it was in the dirt. If we can interface with this, we might jumpstart the core systems. Get off this rust bucket. Mira crossed her arms, mandibles clicking in doubt. And if it backfires? The last probe we activated fried half the comms array. We're down to emergency beacons, Kale. The collective won't send help for months. The schematic rotated slowly, lines of code scrolling like ancient script. Kale's mind raced, piecing together fragments from human archives, stories of grit, of crews turning scrap into salvation. He isolated a subroutine, a human failsafe designed for unforeseen absences. It pulsed with latent energy waiting. With a deep breath that rattled his gills, he initiated the link. At first, nothing. Then, a low vibration built through the deck plating, syncing with their suits' biomonitors. The viewport stars blurred as the station's attitude thrusters fired unbidden, aligning toward the planet's horizon. Alarms blared, proximity alert. Something below was waking and it wasn't friendly. Mira grabbed his shoulder. Kale, what did you do? He stared at the display, where the terraformer's status flipped from dormant to active. Geysers of steam erupted on the surface below, visible even from orbit as automated drills burrowed deeper. But the readings spiked erratically, overloads, cascading failures from years of neglect. The station lurched, caught in a gravitational tug from the reactivated machinery. Adapting, Kale said, forcing calm into his tone. His tentacles flew across the controls, overriding the human protocol with Vexry logic. It was like wrestling a ghost. The system anticipated their moves, countering with bursts of raw power that shook the hull. A panel sparked, and Mira dove to seal it, her caution yielding to action. The vibration peaked, then steadied. The schematic stabilized, revealing a network of subsurface tunnels lighting up one by one. Resources, water, minerals, redirected toward a central hub. Not destruction but rebirth. The humans had built it to endure without them, a seed for whatever came next. But as the station settled into a stable orbit, A new alert flashed. Incoming transmission. Not from the collective but from deeper in the system. Another human relic, stirring. Kale exchanged a glance with Mira, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. The heavens might have lost their purpose, but humanity's shadows were lengthening, pulling them into the unknown. They had bought time, but the cost was clear. The station's power reserves were draining fast to maintain the link. One wrong move, and they'd be adrift, with the planet's awakening machines claiming them as the first tribute. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Kale's scales, casting erratic shadows on the walls of the observatory dome. He hunched over the controls, his claws tapping a frantic rhythm against the worn interface. The stars outside, once a comforting tapestry, now mocked him with their indifference, the void where humanity's signals had pulsed now a silent scar. 3 cycles had passed since the exodus, and the orbital array was failing faster than projected. If they couldn't reroute power from the secondary relays, the entire network would collapse, stranding their fleet in the outer reaches. "Tell me you've got something," Lyra said, her voice cutting through the hum of failing circuits. She leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, her iridescent feathers ruffled from hours of pacing. The scout captain's eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on him. Lyra had always been the bold one, charging into uncharted nebulae without a second thought, but even she couldn't hide the strain-etching lines around her beak. Kale didn't look up. "The humans left us their schematics, but without their fusion cores, it's like trying to ignite a star with a sparkler. The relays are at 23% capacity. One more surge and we're blind." His tail flicked in frustration, knocking a loose panel askew. He righted it with a grunt, the metallic clang echoing in the confined space. Vex, the young technician, hovered nearby, his smaller frame buzzing with nervous energy. He clutched a diagnostic tablet, its screen scrolling data in frantic loops. "What if we adapt the gravitic stabilizers? The humans used them for efficiency boosts in their deep space haulers. It might bridge the gap." Vex's enthusiasm was a double-edged blade, innovative, yes, but often untested, born from the archives of human ingenuity they'd scavenged before the vanishing. Lyra pushed off the wall, striding to the viewport. The planet below, Elisera Prime, spun lazily, its surface dotted with the skeletal remains of human outposts. They'd built wonders there, cities that harnessed storms for power, bridges spanning chasms that laughed at gravity. And then, without warning, they packed up their ships and left, their final transmissions a cryptic farewell about returning to the cradle. The heavens had lost their purpose, the elders said, but Kale knew better. Purpose wasn't lost, it was stolen, leaving his people to scramble in the dark. "Adapted how?" Kale asked, finally meeting Vex's gaze. The kid's eyes gleamed with that human-like spark, grit wrapped in curiosity. It was unnerving how the younger generation mimicked the vanished species, poring over their relics like sacred text. Vex stepped forward, projecting a holographic schematic onto the console. Lines of blue light danced, illustrating the array's web of nodes. "See here? The stabilizers can pulse a feedback loop, siphoning ambient energy from the solar winds. It's risky, the humans warned about overloads in high radiation fields, but if we modulate the frequency to match our plasma injectors, it could work. Give us enough juice to realign the primary dish." Lyra tilted her head, studying the projection. "Risky how?" "We've lost 2 scouts already to these blackouts. If the array goes down mid-transit, the fleet scatters like dust in a gale." Kale rubbed his temple ridges, the weight of command settling heavier. He wasn't a leader by nature, cautious, methodical, more at home with equations than egos, but with the council fragmented, someone had to hold the threads. The overload could fry the stabilizers permanently. No more fine-tuning orbits, no automated defenses. We'd be vulnerable to the drift pirates or worse. He paused, glancing at the stars. Humanity's absence had emboldened the fringe worlds. Raids on supply lines were up 40%, their tech scavenged and twisted into weapons. Vex's wings fluttered. "But if we don't try, we're done anyway. The elders are rationing fuel, another cycle, and we can't even maintain station keeping." Silence stretched, broken only by the console's warning beep. Lyra's gaze shifted from the hologram to Kale, a silent challenge. She'd pushed for this mission from the start, arguing that clinging to human ways was their salvation, not their curse. Kale exhaled, nodding once. All right. Simulated first. Ensign Kira, the navigator, leaned forward, her witty edge dulled by exhaustion. Eddies are the least of it. Look at this. She tapped the display, zooming in on a cluster of anomalous readings. Not debris, something coordinated, pulsing with artificial signatures. Probes? Drones? In this emptiness, where humanity's sudden exodus had left only echoes, anything moving with intent felt like a threat. Lyra's mind raced back to the archives they'd salvaged from the abandoned Mars outpost. Humanity's final broadcasts, cryptic warnings about the reckoning, a cataclysm that pulled them into hyperspace without a trace. The Eternal Vigil, a xenoarchaeological vessel from the Collective, had been chasing those echoes for cycles. Now, trapped in the debris field of what was once Sol's outer ring, they faced their own reckoning. A failing ship and unknown pursuers closing in. Arm the point defenses, Lyra ordered, rising to her feet. Brave as ever, she moved to the tactical station, her boots echoing softly on the grated deck. The ship shuddered again, a low rumble vibrating through the hull. Outside, through the viewport, the asteroid belt loomed like jagged teeth, remnants of human mining ops long silent. Tarek hesitated, his eyes flicking to the power readouts. Captain, that'll drain the reserves. We might not have enough to restart the drive. Then we make it count, she said, meeting his gaze. No speeches, just the quiet resolve that had kept them alive through 3 system jumps. Kira nodded, plotting evasion vectors with quick, efficient swipes. I've got a slingshot path through the belt. Risky, but it'll buy us time, if those signals are hostiles. The first alert blared. Proximity warning. On the display, 3 sleek shadows detached from the asteroid haze, their hulls gleaming with unfamiliar alloys. Not human tech, sleeker, predatory. Lyra's heart pounded as she authorized the weapon's sink. Fire at will. Tarek, prioritize the core. Kira, fly like the void's chasing you. The Vigil lurched forward, thrusters flaring blue against the black. A burst of plasma lanced from the pursuers, grazing the shields in a shower of sparks. Inside, alarms wailed, but Lyra felt the camaraderie ignite, a shared breath, a unified push. They weren't just surviving, they were piecing together why the stars had gone quiet, why humanity's ingenuity had vanished into the night. As the ship weaved through tumbling rocks, Tarek muttered a prayer to the old collective gods, his hands steadying a makeshift bypass. Relays stabilizing, 20%. Kira hooped softly, banking hard around a massive boulder. 1 down. They clipped it. But the remaining 2 closed fast, their weapons charging with an ominous hum audible even through the hull. Lyra strapped in, her mind sharpening on the puzzle. These weren't scavengers. They bore markings like the ancient human glyphs, warnings of the reckoning. Allies? Or the very force that had emptied the cradle of life. The chase intensified, the belt a deadly maze. A near miss rocked the ship, console sparking, but they pressed on, human grit echoing in their veins despite their alien blood. The heavens might have lost their purpose, but here in the heart of the storm, purpose found them. The dim glow of the auxiliary lights flickered across the command deck of the Eternal Vigil, casting long shadows that danced like uneasy spirits. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles whitening as she stared at the holographic display. The fleet sensors had picked up the anomaly hours ago, a ripple in the fabric of space-time, echoing the same signature that had swallowed humanity's last outposts a decade prior. But this was different. Closer. Hungrier. Status on the probe, Lieutenant? Ilara's voice cut through the hum of strained engines, steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the anchor here, the one who kept the crew from unraveling, her caution a shield against the void's chaos. Lieutenant Cale Thorne, ever the witty spark in their grim ensemble, tapped furiously at his panel. His fingers flew, a blur of precision born from years dodging asteroid fields and diplomatic minefields. Probes holding at 87% integrity, Captain. But whatever's out there is chewing through our signal like it's made of tinfoil. We're getting fragments, star maps, old human tech signatures. It's like they're calling. Ensign Mira Hale, the youngest and boldest of the trio, leaned forward from her navigation station, her eyes sharp with that unyielding curiosity that had earned her a spot on this relic of a ship. Brave to a fault, she often charged where others hesitated. Calling? Or luring? We lost 3 scouts last cycle to echoes like this. If we push closer we could lose the vigil too. Elara nodded, weighing the words. The challenge wasn't just the anomaly, it was the fleet's dwindling resources. Fuel cells at 42%, life support ration to essentials. One wrong move, and the eternal vigil became another ghost in the stars, joining the chorus of abandoned vessels that had dotted the galaxy since humanity's vanishing. The cost was etched in every face aboard, families fractured, alliances frayed. They couldn't afford to chase phantoms, but ignoring this felt like surrendering the last thread of purpose. Adjust course to intercept vector, Elara decided, her tone firm, brooking no argument. But arm the countermeasures. Kale, prep the quantum disruptor. Mira, plot an escape if things turn sour. Kale shot her a grin, though it didn't reach his eyes. Aye, Captain. Because nothing says fun expedition like poking a black hole with a stick. The ship shuddered as it accelerated, the anomaly swelling on the view screen like a bruise blooming across the cosmos. Myra's hands steadied on the controls, her breath even. Engaging now. A fringe, 5 minutes. Tension coiled in the air, thick as engine grease. The first plan, send a drone for remote scans, had backfired spectacularly when the probe veered off script, drawn into the ripple like a moth to flame. Now they were committing the ship itself, a gamble that twisted Elara's stomach. She remembered the old logs, humanity's final broadcasts. Warnings of an ascension, a leap beyond the stars, leaving the galaxy adrift. The heavens, once lit by human ambition, had dimmed without them. What purpose remained for species like hers, scavenging the remnants? Alarms blared suddenly, red lights pulsing. Contact. Mira shouted, her voice cracking with urgency. It's not empty space, structures emerging. Massive. Like cities unfolding from nothing. Kale's console lit up with data streams. Human design, no doubt. But modified. Energy readings off the charts. Captain, if we cross that threshold, we adapt, Elara interrupted, standing tall. Together. Shields up. All hands brace. The vigil plunged forward, the anomaly yawning wide. Reality warped around them, stars streaking into luminous trails. Inside the ripple, the impossible took shape. Colossal spires of alloy and light humming with latent power, remnants of humanity's hidden exodus. But they weren't abandoned. Shadows moved within, echoes, guardians, or something reborn. A jolt rocked the deck, systems flickering. Mira wrestled the helm, sweat beading on her brow. We're in. But it's pulling us deeper. Engines at max. Kale's disruptor fired, a lance of energy slicing into the void. It bought them seconds, the ship bucking free of the initial grip. Yet as they stabilized, a transmission pierced the static, faint human voices, layered with static and sorrow. Welcome, to what we left behind. Elara's heart raced. The cost of this discovery? Their fleet's last reserves, perhaps their lives. But in that moment, purpose flickered back to life, fragile as a newborn star. The heavens weren't lost, they were waiting. Zara's claws dug into the console as the ship's alarms blared a staccato rhythm, red lights pulsing like wounds across the dim bridge. The grav plates had failed mid-jump, leaving them tumbling through the void toward the fractured remnants of what the humans had called Epsilon Eridani's outer belt. Crix gripped the yoke with both sets of arms, his mandibles clicking in frustration. But the inertial dampeners were shot, another casualty of their scavenged fuel reserves running dry. Lyra floated nearby, her bioluminescent markings flickering erratically as she patched into the auxiliary systems, her voice a sharp whisper over the din. I told you that bypass would hold only for the core thrust. Now we've got debris incoming and the hull's integrity is at 30%. Crix didn't look up, his eyes locked on the viewport where jagged asteroids loomed like teeth in the starless dark. We had no choice. The signal from that human derelict was our only lead, faint, but it matched the patterns from the Exodus archives. He yanked at a lever, firing the maneuvering thrusters in short, desperate bursts. The ship lurched, scraping against a spinning rock fragment that sent vibrations rattling through the frame. Zara felt the impact in her exoskeleton, a dull ache spreading from her joints. She'd always been the cautious one, the one who mapped contingencies before leaping, but out here with humanity's ghost trail leading them into this graveyard, caution felt like just another word for surrender. Lyra's tendrils danced over a holographic display, pulling up schematics of the human tech they'd jury-rigged into their engines. The alloys they left behind, unbelievable tensile strength, but without their fusion catalysts, it's like trying to ignite wet tinder. If we don't stabilize the orbit in the next cycle, we'll be pulverized. She glanced at Zara, her eyes narrowing. Your idea to siphon from the asteroid field? It bought us time, but now the debris wake is accelerating. We need a new vector, something clever, not brute force. Zara pushed off the wall, drifting toward the engineering panel, her mind racing through the schematics she'd memorized during their long haul from the core worlds. The humans hadn't just vanished. They'd engineered their departure with layers of redundancy, leaving echoes in the stars that whispered of purpose lost. But purpose for what? Their ship, the Ether's Lament, was a patchwork of alien desperation, fueled by scraps of human ingenuity that the heavens themselves seemed to mourn. She keyed in a sequence, rerouting power from life support to the forward shields. The air grew thinner, recyclers humming louder to compensate. We used their gravitic anchor tech, she said, her voice steady despite the chill seeping into her limbs. The derelict we passed had remnants of it. Deploy a probe to latch onto that large fragment ahead. It'll slingshot us clear, but it'll drain the reserves completely. Crix's mandibles parted in a grim approximation of a smile. Risky. If the probe fails, we're done. But he nodded, aligning the launch tube. The probe ejected with a whoosh, a silver dart vanishing into the swirling chaos. Seconds stretched into eternity as they watched the feed. It snagged the asteroid's edge, magnetic grapples biting deep into the human-forged debris. Wait, no, this rock bore faint etchings, orbital scars from long-abandoned stations. The ship groaned as tension built, the pull yanking them sideways. Alarm spiked again, hull breach in the aft section. Zara's hearts pounded. She'd miscalculated the stress on the welds. Lyra cursed, sealing the breach with emergency foam that expanded like alien flesh knitting wounds. It's holding, barely. But the trajectory's off. We're veering toward the belt's core, not out. Crix wrestled the controls, sweat beading on his carapace, the camaraderie of their trio fraying under the strain. They'd come this far chasing humanity's why, the sudden silence that had unmoored the Galactic Council, leaving species like theirs adrift without the humans' endless innovations. Now that pursuit threatened to end them. Zara adjusted the anchor's pulse, fine-tuning the gravitic field with a human algorithm she'd decoded weeks ago. A simple loop of code that bent physics like clay. The ship stabilized, inching free from the deadly spiral, but the cost hit hard. Lights dimmed to emergency reds and the NAV computer flickered offline. As the belt receded, Crix slumped in his harness, exhaling a ragged breath. We made it. But the signal's gone silent now. Whatever the humans left behind in that core, it's waiting. Lyra patched a ration dispenser, handing out nutrient bars that tasted of recycled regret. Zara stared at the stars, the heavens vast and indifferent, wondering if humanity's departure had been a gift or a curse, one that forced them to find their own purpose, scarred but unbroken. The Ether's Lament limped onward, its crew forged tighter in the fire of near loss, toward whatever truth lay buried in the silence. Ilara gripped the console, her knuckles paling against the worn alloy. The ship's hum had turned erratic, a stuttering pulse that mirrored the doubt gnawing at her core. Outside the viewport, the nebulous tendrils swirled like forgotten dreams, but they offered no answers, only the vast emptiness where human signals had once burned bright. We're losing thrust again, she muttered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fins. Thorn, ever the technician, was already elbow-deep in the access panel, his tools clattering like impatient thoughts. Patched it twice already, Thorn replied, not looking up. His wit had dulled under the strain, replaced by the grim focus of someone who'd bet his life on makeshift fixes. This relic wasn't built for nebula runs. If we push harder, the core might rupture. Lyra, the scholar, hovered nearby, her luminous eyes scanning the holographic charts. Cautious as always, she adjusted her stance against the deck's subtle vibrations, unwilling to voice the fear that this detour, chasing a faint human echo, might doom them all. The challenge had crystallized hours ago, a rogue gravitic shear slicing through the nebula, warping their path toward a debris field of shattered moons. It wasn't malice, just the universe's indifference, but the risk was real. One wrong vector and they joined the cosmic junk. Ilara had plotted the slingshot maneuver, banking on human ingenuity, tales they'd idolized, stories of crews turning peril into triumph with sheer grit. But theory clashed against reality. Their first attempt had backfired, shearing off a stabilizer fin and leaving them drifting too close to the hazard. Options? Ilara asked, her brave resolve cracking just enough to invite input. She wiped sweat from her brow, the cabin's air thick with ozone and tension. Thorn yanked a sparking relay free, sparks dancing like fleeting stars. We could vent plasma to counter the shear, buy time to realign. Risky though. Might ignite the nebula's gases. His voice carried the weight of half measures, the kind that had sustained their race since the humans vanished without a whisper, leaving the heavens adrift in purposeless glow. Lyra shook her head, her caution an anchor. No. That echo we detected, it's weakening. If we lose it now, we lose any chance of understanding why they left. The archives say humans mastered worse. Black holes, wars of their own making. We adapt or we fade like they did. She tapped the chart, zooming in on a narrow corridor through the debris, lined with tumbling boulders that could pulverize them in an instant. Ilara nodded, decision forming in the silence. Thorn prepped the vents. Lyra refined the vector, used the human navigation logs we salvaged. They turned voids into highways, we'll do the same. The ship groaned as Thorn complied, his hands swift despite the doubt etching his face. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent as the shear tugged them sideways. Ilara strapped in, heart pounding against her ribs, the camaraderie of their small crew the only light in the dimming control room. The maneuver began with a shudder, plasma blooming from the vents in controlled bursts, blue fire against the nebula's purple haze. Debris loomed, a jagged silhouette rushing to meet them. Lyra's calculations fed into the engines, the ship twisting like a living thing, evading a boulder by meters that felt like millimeters. Thorn hooped once, a spark of his old wit returning, but it died as a secondary tremor hit, cracking the hull with a sound like breaking bone. We're through, Ilara breathed as the debris field receded. But the echo sharpened on their sensors, not a farewell but a beacon pulsing with unfamiliar rhythm. The cost lingered, a breached compartment venting precious air, and the knowledge that their pursuit had scarred them deeper than the void. Yet in that scar, purpose flickered anew, drawing them onward toward whatever humanity had forsaken. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered like a dying star, casting long shadows across the bridge of the Odyssey. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The alien vessel loomed closer on the viewscreen, its hull a labyrinth of iridescent spines that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. They had evaded the first wave of interceptors by sheer luck, a desperate slingshot maneuver around a gas giant, but this was no skirmish. This was the heart of the collective's fleet, guardians of the heavens who had never known loss until humanity vanished without a trace. Status on the warp core? Ilara's voice cut through the hum of straining systems, steady despite the knot in her gut. Engineer Kai Ramirez wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over a holographic display. Holding at 60%, Captain. But that last hit fried the stabilizers. One more pulse from their weapons and we're space dust. Beside him, Lieutenant Mira Chen leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning tactical readouts. The witty xenolinguist who once cracked jokes during briefings now spoke with clipped precision. They're hailing us again. Same frequency. If we don't respond, they'll assume hostility. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through options that dwindled by the second. The collective's broadcasts had filled the void since humanity's exodus, queries turning to demands, then accusations. Why had the humans abandoned the stars they helped illuminate? The stars that now felt empty, purposeless without the unpredictable spark of Terran ingenuity. But Ilara knew the truth, The exodus wasn't abandonment. It was survival, a mass migration triggered by the quantum rift that had swallowed Earth whole. They were the last remnants, a scout ship flung back into the fray. "Open the channel," she said finally. "Let's see if words can buy us time." The view screen shimmered, resolving into the form of High Arbiter Thaler, his elongated features framed by a halo of neural filaments. His voice echoed, resonant and cold. "Voss of the Odyssey. You trespass in sacred voids. The heavens weep for your kind's betrayal. Surrender your vessel or face the nullification." Ilara met his gaze, her brave resolve a shield against the fear gnawing at her. "Arbiter, we're not here to fight. Humanity didn't leave without warning, we were taken. A rift, an anomaly. Let us explain, and perhaps we can mend what's broken." Thaler's filaments twitched, a sign of agitation in his species. "Lies. Your ingenuity poisoned the balance. Probes, expansions, relentless curiosity. Now the stars drift without purpose. Yield or be unmade." The channel cut, and alarms blared as targeting locks engaged. Kai cursed under his breath. Incoming barrage. Evasive patterns? Myra's hands flew across her station. "I'll try jamming their sensors, reroute power from life support if I have to." Ilara unstrapped herself, standing tall. "Do it. Kai, get me a firing solution on their weak points. We're not surrendering the last light of humanity." The ship lurched as the first energy lance grazed their shields, sparks erupting from consoles. Kai patched in auxiliary thrusters, the Odyssey twisting like a cornered predator. Myra's hack pierced the collective's network just enough, a fleeting window where their spines dimmed, confused by false echoes of the ship's position. But the respite was brief. Another volley struck true, buckling the hull and engineering. Alarms wailed, red lights bathing the bridge in blood. Ilara braced against the shutter, her mind flashing to the crew lost in the rift, the worlds they'd left behind. This wasn't just escape, it was defiance, a testament to human grit. "Captain?" Kai shouted, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Cores overloading. We need to vent plasma or it'll chain react." Ilara's jaw tightened. Venting would cripple their warp drive, stranding them in this forsaken sector. But the alternative was oblivion. "Do it. Mira, keep that channel open. Broadcast everything, the rift data, our logs. Let them see we're not the villains." As Kai initiated the purge, a brilliant plume of superheated gas erupted from the Odyssey's vents, blinding the alien sensors in a temporary supernova. The ship bucked wildly, inertial dampeners failing, flinging Ilara against a bulkhead. Pain lanced through her side, but she pushed up, eyes on the view screen. The collective ship faltered, its spines retracting in disarray. Thaler's voice crackled back, laced with uncertainty. "What sorcery is this? Your light, it burns." "Not sorcery," Ilara replied, breathless. "It's what we do. We adapt. We endure. The heavens lost purpose because you never understood us. Help us find our way back, or watch us light the dark alone." Silence stretched, broken only by the groan of the dying engines. Then, slowly the alien vessel powered down its weapons. Not surrender, but a pause, a crack in the cosmic order humanity had always exploited. Mira slumped in her seat, a weary smile breaking through. "They're tractoring us in. Hostile but not firing." Kai sealed the core breach, his hands trembling. "Warp's toast for now. We're at their mercy." Ilara sank back into her chair, the weight of the moment settling like stardust. Mercy from the stars? For the first time since the Exodus, it felt possible. But the cost, the damaged ship, the uncertain alliance, lingered like the faint scar of the rift on the view screen. The heavens might yet find their purpose, forged in the fire of human resolve. The dim hum of the auxiliary generators filled the observation deck, a sound that had become as familiar as the void outside. Lyra gripped the console edge, her knuckles pale against the worn alloy, watching the readouts flicker with the last dregs of power. The stars, those indifferent pinpricks humanity had once charted with such reckless ambition, stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, mocking their efforts. Beside her, Kale muttered under his breath, his fingers dancing over the jury-rigged interface, coaxing life from circuits that weren't meant for their kind. "We've got alignment," he said, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. The plan had been simple in theory. Repurpose the old human beacon arrays to signal the fleet's return path, using the gravitational echoes of the lost colony worlds as a guide. But nothing about human tech was simple. Their machines breathed with a chaotic ingenuity, full of hidden failsafes and adaptive protocols that twisted like living things under alien hands. Torin paced behind them, his cautious steps measured, eyes darting to the structural integrity feeds. "If this overloads, the deck plating buckles. We lose the array and we're adrift, purpose or no." He'd been the voice of restraint from the start, the one who'd argued against activating the core without full simulations. But desperation had won out hours ago when the resource shortage hit critical. Oxygen recyclers failing, food synthesizers silent. The heavens had lost their purpose without humanity's guiding light, but they, the remnants of 3 species thrown together on this forsaken station, had found a fragile one in survival. Lyra shot him a glance, her brave resolve hardening her features. "Then we don't let it overload. Kale, shunt the excess to the outer rings. Buy us time." She leaned in, adjusting the modulator herself, her movements precise from years of defying the odds in derelict salvage runs. The station groaned in response, a deep vibration rattling the deck, but the beacon's pulse strengthened, a rhythmic cry piercing the black. Kale's witty grin flashed, brief as a solar flare. "Humans built this to last eternities, or so their logs bragged. Let's see if it holds up to a little improvisation." He triggered the final sequence, and the array ignited, beams of modulated energy lancing out in precise arcs, weaving through the asteroid field that had hidden their position for cycles. The rival salvage clans, those opportunistic scavengers from the outer rims, had been closing in, drawn by the station's faint emissions. One more failure, and they'd claim the human relics, stripping away the last threads of what might bring the fleet back. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing across the deck. Torin froze. "Hull breach in Sector 7. They're firing probes." The rival ships dotted the sensors now, shadows against the starfield, their automated drones probing for weaknesses. Lyra's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she keyed the emergency seals, her voice calm over the comms. "Kale, lock the array on the primary vector. Torin, reroute power from life support, 30 seconds max." They moved as one, a triad forged in the fire of necessity. Kale's hands blurred on the controls, adapting the human code on the fly, twisting its logic into something that fit their desperate geometry. Torin, swallowing his caution, diverted the flow, the air growing thin and metallic in their lungs. Lyra stood at the viewport, directing the beam's focus, her breath fogging the glass. The first probe shattered against the energy field, a bloom of debris scattering like forgotten dreams. The beacon's signal peaked, a clarion call echoing across the void. On the sensors, a distant blip responded, faint but growing. The fleet. Humanity's echoes, returning not as saviors, but as a reminder of what grit could reclaim. The rival ships veered, their probes withdrawing as the array's defenses held, but not without cost. Sector 7 vented atmosphere in a silent plume, and the station listed slightly, its orbit decaying by a fraction. As the blips solidified into inbound vectors, Lyra slumped against the console, exhaustion etching lines on her face. Kale chuckled weakly, wiping his hands. "Told you their ingenuity was contagious." Torin nodded, staring at the stars that now held promise again. The heavens had found a new purpose, not in humanity's absence but in the hands that carried their fire forward. Yet the breach would need repairs, the shortages lingered, and the rivals wouldn't forget. Survival, they knew, was never a clean victory.